Justin Overton, Executive Director and Staff Riverkeeper at Coosa Riverkeeper, coming to you with the part 2 of our PFAS video. So if you're like, Justin, what is PFAS? Go ahead and stop, and we'll be sure to link in the comments down below so you can see the part 1 of PFAS. But this is our new studio. Thank you so much for supporting our end of the year campaign. We are in the process of moving and expanding into our larger office space so we can continue providing great content that's educational so that you can advocate for your river. So let's dive in. So if you're unfamiliar, PFAS are forever chemicals, and again, I cannot tell you how important it is to go to part 1 because the intention of this video is to talk about the data that we collected on the Coosa River and our next steps for monitoring PFAS contamination on the Coosa River system. So throughout the summer and fall, Waterkeeper Alliance, which we are proud members of, had waterkeepers throughout the country on 114 waterways collect PFAS samples. And of those samples collected, 83% had at least one PFAS compound in them. So we're going to talk today about what that means, as well as how you can help elevate this issue to your elected officials and Congress to ensure that we're not just protecting the river, but we're also protecting public health and the health of the critters that rely on the Coosa. So the reason that we participated in this widespread study of contamination of PFAS is because there is a huge gap in water quality data when it comes to PFAS contamination. And we're very proud that we were able to participate in this nationwide study, which is a huge tool in advocating for our river systems. So this demonstrates, given that 83% of the waterways that collected data for this PFAS contamination project, that we need Congress and EPA to act, because PFAS is a forever chemical. It is persistent in our environment and bioaccumulates up the food chain. So this is important for the health and safety of the communities on the Coosa River and throughout the country, because ADEM, our Environmental Department of Environmental Management, refuses to set any water quality criteria until they hear from EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. It's important to note that because we're seeing states all across the United States being preemptive in setting water quality standards, criteria, to go ahead and start curbing this contamination to be protective of water quality and public health. So let's dive into the data that was collected on the Coosa and throughout Alabama. So we were given one sample, and it was really difficult to figure out where exactly we were going to take this sample, but we decided to take it on Neely Henry Lake. And that's because we know that there are upstream sources that are discharging PFAS into our river system, and there's a historic issue with PFAS. So we felt like that would be a great place to start gathering numeric data on PFAS contamination. So we took ours on Neely Henry Lake, but other sites in Alabama for comparison were the Black Warrior River, the Cahaba River, Buck Creek, the Pea River, Little River, and several other places. So again, we're just talking about the samples collected on the Coosa River system. So we unfortunately collected samples that had a total of 13 PFAS compounds. And it's important to note that because that's a lot of different compounds. There are over 9,000 compounds within the PFAS family. So finding 13 in one sample unfortunately put us at the top of the PFAS contamination of the sites sampled in the state. So we had PFOA, which 16.8 parts per trillion. So that's over 4,000 times higher than the current public health standard of 0.004 parts per trillion. PFOS was 4.4 parts per trillion, and that's 220 times higher than the health standard of 0.02 parts per trillion. You have to think about how tiny of an increment that is. So this is an astoundingly high number, and especially knowing that this is a persistent issue in contamination in the Coosa system, it's important that we gather this data so that you can make an informed decision about when and where you enjoy the Coosa, but also so that we can advocate for the river and ensure that there are regulations that are going to be protective of us and of the river moving forward. We also had PFHXA, PFPEA, and PFBS, which were all notable compounds. And again, you can read all about this on our blog, which we'll also link below. So I know this seems like a lot of data, and it can be really discouraging because us telling you that there's a forever chemical within a lake that you know and love and recreate on, I know how difficult that might be to hear. And it's not personal. We chose this site again because we knew there was a persistent issue and wanted to have numeric data that we could share with you as members as well as people interested in our work. So what's next for Coosa Riverkeeper? Now that we've released this data, we want to continue educating the public about what PFAS are, how persistent they are, and what products they're in, and also how you can help us advocate for the river. We are going to have a major increase in the next couple of years in monitoring. So we just took one sample. This is one snapshot on the Coosa system. We anticipate to continue monitoring other lakes and tributaries around places that we think might be discharging PFAS, again, to build up our data. We are a data-driven organization, and we don't share this data to scare you. We believe it's your right to know when and where water quality is compromised, and we believe that we, the people, deserve to know this information, as well as the polluting industries that are discharging into our rivers need to understand how angry and frustrated we are about this prevalent contamination throughout so many of our waterways, and especially the Coosa. So look for more monitoring data from us. As well as it'll be interesting to see the Coosa River system was tested this year for new fish consumption advisories, and it's our understanding that they are starting to test for PFAS within fish tissue on the Coosa, so y'all be sure to check back in the summer where we will hopefully have updated advisories. As well as last but certainly not least is we need to advocate as a community for protective limits and water quality criteria for PFAS and having enforceable deadlines. It's one thing to set a regulation, but we need those regulations enforced. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to swim on over to coosariver.org to learn more about how PFAS affects you.